Hello and welcome to A Bit of a Christie, the podcast where we are fueled by the writings of Agatha Christie to examine a variety of subjects. Today we focus on Dumb Witness. Those of you who have read the novel won't be surprised to hear that today our two main focuses are murder and mediums. We are joined by not one but two fantastic guests, and we have gone a bit off-piste with our format, so stay tuned for some fun, both familiar and some not so. As ever, we begin with looking at the background to the novel and the year it was released. Hop aboard our time machine as we go back to the first half of 1937. Surely the world so many years ago was a far cry from what we know today. As the year begins, Edward VIII abdicates from the throne as he chooses the love of his American sweetheart and divorcee Wallis Simpson over a life married to the crown. His brother George VI is formally crowned in May at Westminster Abbey, a fate shared by his grandson Charles III 86 years later. In the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt is running the show and trying to tackle the Great Depression. The King of Swing, Benny Goodman, is still playing in the dance halls, and people are eagerly awaiting Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is also the year that the iconic Golden Gate Bridge opens in San Francisco. The Hindenburg airship, a symbol of luxury air travel, burst into flames in Lakehurst, New Jersey, marking a tragic disaster that spelled the end of the era of airships. Amelia Earhart makes a solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean from Hawaii to California, setting a new aviation record. Weeks later, Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, disappear over the Pacific Ocean during their attempt to circumnavigate the globe, sparking an enduring mystery. In South Africa, the United Party wins the general election. Politics isn't the only thing heating up, as Cape Town installs its first electric traffic lights, and cricket fever hits as the national team tours England, while King George VI and Queen Elizabeth tour South Africa. In 1937, the British government appointed the Peel Commission, led by Lord William Peel, to investigate the cause of an ongoing Arab-Jewish conflict and to recommend a solution. The Commission's report, issued in July, proposed the partition of Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states, with Jerusalem as an internationally administered city. This partition plan was not implemented at the time. A year in which a king is crowned, there is conflict in the Middle East, a prince cements his love for his American wife, and there is a cost of living crisis named the Great Depression. We take a further look at the second half of 1937 in the next episode. Agatha Christie was inspired to write Dumb Witness after receiving a letter from a fan who asked Christie to include her dog, a wire fox terrier named Peter, in her next book. The book is dedicated to Peter, and sadly he died in the following year, 1938. The book was published under several different titles, including Poirot Loses a Client in Portugal, Letter of a Dead Woman in Holland, and The Dog Who Played with a Toy Ball in Germany. But who was the client that Poirot lost? Was it the woman who wrote the letter before she died? And how the devil does a dog playing with a toy ball relate to the plot? Let's now meet the cast of this mysterious tale, and it seems only right to start with the matriarch of the story, Emily Arundel.
My name is Emily Arundel, or at least that's what they called me when I was alive. I had lived a long, eventful life in Little Green House in Market Basing. I never married, and I was the last survivor of my 5 siblings: Matilda, Emily, Arabella, Thomas and Agnes. Market Basing had been my home since I was 16 years old, and I was well known in the town. You might even say I was one of the old school. My life was also enriched by my constant companion, a wire fox terrier named Bob, whom I loved dearly and had a very special relationship with. I had always been delicate, plagued with health issues since childhood. Doctors had been a constant presence in my life, but I had somehow outlived all of my siblings. People often saw me as being well over 70 and in delicate health, so my eventual passing in May 1936 didn't come as a shock to anyone. 18 months before my last illness, I had a similar attack that nearly took me away. When it came to my will, I kept my own counsel. My fortune was left entirely to my companion, Wilhelmina Lawson, and when the will was read after my death, it surprised everyone. People in town had their own theories about it, but I never explained my motives to my lawyer. I suppose I was a typical product of my generation. I could be autocratic and overbearing, but I was also warm-hearted. My tongue was sharp, but my actions were kind. I had a great sense of family obligation. In my youth, I was considered a handsome girl. In my old age, I was a well-preserved, handsome old lady with a straight back and a brisk manner. My liver troubles gave a faint yellowness to my skin, but I remained proud. I had known Miss Caroline Peabody for more than 50 years. Both of us believed in upholding family dignity, family solidarity, and complete reticence on family matters. As I grew older, I found it hard to sleep and refused sleeping draughts, deeming them for the weak. I often roamed the house at night, feeling the presence of my departed family members. It was during those sleepless nights that I wrote a letter to Hercule Poirot, seeking his assistance in a strictly private matter. Unfortunately, I forgot to post the letter, and it was only sent after my demise. My final days were marked by a strange incident. I became convinced that someone had tried to harm me, possibly one of my relations. A fall down the stairs led to my conclusion. In my breath, there was a phosphorescent glow, an eerie, luminous haze that revealed the sinister presence of a murderer. I wonder whether you'll be able to figure out what happened.
Some of you listening may remember the famous Australian soap Neighbours, and the lyrics to the theme tune begin with "Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours." But who were Emily Arundel's neighbours? And were they good neighbours or something else? It's time to introduce the Tripp Sisters.
I am Isabel Tripp, and I suppose you could call me the more ethereal half of our little family duo. My sister Julia and I share a home near Little Greenhouse, right next door to Emily Arundel. Our way of life might have struck her as peculiar. She didn't quite get us. She found our clothes ridiculous, our penchant for vegetarian and uncooked meals absurd, and our manners a bit too affected. In her eyes, we were women of no traditions, of no roots. But she was amused by our friendship with her companion, Wilhelmina, and she tolerated our presence. Julia might be the more robust of the two of us, but I have my own charm, or so I've been told. My fair hair is a wild cascade of curls, and I've been known to carry myself with a girlish, whimsical air. One night, I played the part of a medium connecting E.A., Emily Arundel, with the spirit of the late General Arundel. It was a touching moment, filled with love and comfort, and Emily seemed a bit surprised. I suppose she hadn't pegged the General as a sentimental type. And then, one day, in walked two rather enigmatic gentlemen, Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. Julia introduced them as Mr. Parrot and Captain Hawkins. I couldn't help but wonder what their arrival might signify. As far as their perceptions went, Captain Hastings, with his keen intuition, probably categorised us as vegetarians, Christian Scientists, spiritualists, and enthusiastic amateur photographers. I must say, he was quite spot on. Our role in the grand scheme of things became more apparent as time went on. We shared some crucial information about Emily's untimely death. We described a luminous haze enveloping her head, an almost heavenly aura. We know she moved on to the next plane, but was her passage there eased by another?
As we've just heard, the Tripp Sisters believed they had the power to connect to a world beyond our own. Imagine having the ability to see what others can't, to tap into the unseen and to connect with the spiritual realm. Our guest today, Julie Angel, is an international psychic medium with over 19 years of experience. But she's not just your run-of-the-mill psychic, she's a real-life psychic detective. During her time in the police service, Julie harnessed her extraordinary abilities to prevent and solve crimes, find missing persons and, incredibly, save lives. Julie, thank you for being on the show.
Pleasure, thank you for asking me on.
Just for those listeners that perhaps don't know who you are and what you're all about, would you like to introduce yourself for us, please?
Okay, so Julie Angel actually is my name. I'm not so pompous as to call myself an angel. I'm classify myself as an international psychic medium. I do one-to-one readings, evenings of clairvoyance, and exorcisms, amongst other things.
Now, for me, I'm going to go right back to the very basics because I think this is a question that a few of the listeners may be asking. What actually is a medium?
A medium is someone that can communicate between this world and the next. Different mediums have different skills and abilities or ways of going about things. There's a medium and there's an evidential medium. A medium would sometimes have to hold an object, a ring, or a photograph of the person that wants to come through. I'm classifying myself as an evidential medium because I don't need anything from the person that I'm doing the reading for. So I also work mainly clairvoyantly, which means I see pictures in my mind's eye that aren't my own thoughts. I work a little bit clairaudiently, which is when you're hearing what the spirit world is saying. And most people, whether they're aware of it or not, are clairsentient. That's your gut feeling, your gut instinct. Sometimes I smell things or taste things in my mouth as well. But there's lots of different aspects to mediumship.
Friends of mine have been to see mediums. Friends of mine have been to see what would be called a spiritualist. And then you see posters around advertising psychic ability. Are they all under one umbrella or are they very different things, those, a medium, a spiritualist and a psychic?
I'd say they're completely different. A psychic is someone who's got the ability to see the future, and I do this by seeing and reading auras, which is electromagnetic fields that go around people's bodies. I work clairvoyantly, so I see future events, like it's like watching a film in my head, or sometimes looking at photographs and I basically say what I'm seeing. And yes, I do use tools of divination like tarot cards from runestones, amongst other things. A medium is someone that can talk between this world and next, like I said, like being a phone line between the earth plane and the afterlife. Whereas a spiritualist is a recognised religion. I don't classify myself as a spiritualist because I am more like interfaith. I think people should. There's no one answer to the multiverses, universes, and whatever. So I personally don't follow any religion, sect, cult, or belief. Look at things from a different point of view. So yes, they are very different.
How long have you been a medium? How did you get into it? Was it something that you were sitting there and all of a sudden it happened, or was it something that gradually happened over time?
When I was 4, I saw ghosts, but most kids are sort of psychic, they pick up on things. When I was 9, after falling off a climbing frame and pretty much fracturing my skull, I started to see auras around people. When I was 15, I had my first deck of tarot cards, but it spooked out the family, so I burnt them. I burnt the cards, not the family. And when I was 27, and I was in the police service, my first husband's grandmother passed away, and literally overnight I was cleaning the stairs. I saw her at the top of the stairs. She said, "This is the outfit I bought for your wedding." She was telling me how to feed her cat. She was telling me to pass on messages to her daughter, my future mother-in-law at the time. I thought I was going mad. I went down the doctors and said, "I'm seeing and hearing dead people," and they're telling me things. So yeah, literally it started because I couldn't breathe properly. And what she'd done, she'd actually latched herself onto me because she just had a heart attack and a routine eye operation. And then after that, contracted pneumonia. But I'd never even heard of mediumship up until that point. I thought, I was going crazy. It wouldn't go away. I was seeing so-called dead people who were more alive than us.
So you said right at the beginning there, Julie, about children sort of being susceptible to seeing things, and that is something that I've heard of before. Why do you think that children are able to have that ability?
Probably because they haven't been told that there's no such thing as ghosts, or I think they're particularly intuitive. Often that I've noticed up until the age of 7, then schooling, friends, hobbies, pastimes seem to take over, and so I wouldn't say they lose their intuitive ability completely, but by that time parents or teachers or guardians or somebody would have said there's no such thing as ghosts.
You were saying as well, we're talking about being frightened there, you were saying that your tarot card reading ability frightened your family. Was it because it was just so accurate?
Yeah, I saw my stepsister's divorce coming, and I could see problems with my stepfather's business. And when these things started to come true, plus the fact we had someone come into the high school I was at the time saying that that's the devil's work. I mean, he was obviously a Christian, a reverend or a Christian, and that we shouldn't mess with things like that. I mean, I'm left-handed, and even that was a problem when I was a kid because that was seen as like something evil.
You were saying that you started to see auras. Obviously, we can't put ourselves inside your eyes. We can't see what you see, but could you describe it to us? What does this aura look like?
So if you imagine, well, some of your listeners may be aware of the old Ready Breck advert where there's a red glow that goes around somebody. But even if people, so when I look at someone, an aura on a person is at its strongest around the head, but it does go right around the front of the body and the back of the body, which is quite interesting because there's reference made to auras within the Dumb Witness Agatha Christie book. So it's in layers. It's not all one colour. You'll see several colours, and the same colour can mean different things. For example, so I look at the aura, and then them upstairs tell me what it means to that particular person. Like orange can show somebody being very sociable. Orange could be showing someone being very self-sufficient. Orange and green can show a maternal instinct. So the same colour can mean lots of different things. They show, it's like an imprint. It's like an aura will reflect what's gone on in someone's life, what's going on, and more to the point, what's coming as well. It's quite fascinating stuff.
Can auras actually change as you are looking at a person, or is it something that takes a long time to change colour?
People have got particular skills, talents and abilities they usually have a colour that dominates. So when I do readings for nurses, carers, doctors, paramedics, anything medical, then green seems to be always there. But there have been a few occasions when I've been doing readings for someone and it's like a kaleidoscope. The auras sort of change depending on the person. So that's why I even have repeat clients over the years. I always do an aura drawing because, I mean, that's an example of someone's aura drawing and I write all over it. So it can change depending on what's going on in someone's life. I see auras all the time. It's not something that ever goes away, but the way I see it is that if I had a diary, I wouldn't want somebody reading all my private thoughts and feelings, so I don't go around. I think it's a bit unethical to go around reading people unless they want them to.
We now return to Dumb Witness. Emily Arundel has died, and her next-door neighbours, the Tripp Sisters, are perhaps a little bit unsettling to the untrained eye. But who could really benefit from Emily's death? Let's now hear from her nephew, Charles.
I'm Charles Arundel, Emily Arundel's nephew. I guess you could say I'm the black sheep of the family, the one that always seemed to be in trouble or on the run. In my early 30s, I'd lived a life far different from the rest of my more upstanding relatives. My father was Thomas Arundel and my mother was a widow, Mrs. Varley. Unfortunately, I had squandered the capital of my inheritance from my father, living a life that was, let's say, less conventional. I travelled the world, never staying in one place for too long, and I always seemed to return when I was down on my luck. I stayed in the blue room at the little greenhouse for a time, as my Aunt Emily had wished. She had her reservations about me. She believed I was charming, but untrustworthy. I remember offering to help Wilhelmina Lawson with some domestic task, but she didn't seem too pleased with me. I sensed that she didn't particularly like me, and it struck me as odd in some way. My sister Teresa was quite different from me. She had a connection with Dr. Donaldson, which, I admit, I found rather odd. As my finances dwindled, I had a candid conversation with my aunt. I told her I was in a devil of a hole and needed money. Around £100 would have sufficed. She declined, and that's when I made a rather regrettable decision to take some of her belongings. I knew it was a wrong move, but desperation got the better of me. Dr. Granger, the local physician, described me as an irreverent young devil who cared little about the family's history and was seemingly born to be a trouble to my relatives. I had this habit of flitting around the world, never really settling anywhere. Caroline Peabody expressed similar sentiments, calling me the one who always returned like a bad penny. From my wanderings, always in debt. Isabel Tripp even went as far as to say that I was wanted by the police in some foreign country. When I met Hastings and Poirot, they got to know a different side of me. I guess I had that debonair, carefree charm that some people found likeable. But there was more to me than met the eye.
It seems as though Charles had a good reason to want his Aunt Emily out of the picture, especially where money is concerned. If only we had somebody that could help us solve this mystery. Well, we return now to Julie Angel as she discusses the ethics of being a psychic medium.
Obviously, you've got a sort of a strong code of ethics there. You believe that it would be improper for you to sort of delve into these things that you could do without someone's permission. Do you think there are mediums out there that perhaps don't have your ethical code?
I think, unfortunately, there are some people that like, we get cowboys in certain occupations and dodgy solicitors and dodgy medical malpractices. So there are always some people that, although we're governed by law now, with Foreign Witchcraft Act of 1735, which was replaced by the Fraudulent Medium Act of 1951 that said all psychics, mediums and healers should work for free unless they're seen as a form of entertainment, and now we come under the Consumer Regulations Act. I do think people can go on a bit of an ego trip, so they might be going around dishing out messages to people that don't want them, or they're having a good guess. I remember seeing one guy once, and he says, you will find love again, because I wasn't wearing a wedding ring, but actually at the time I was married. So you can tell that people are sometimes trying to make out that there's something that they're not, which makes it difficult for people that are genuine.
Do you think that Do you think that, I mean, I don't know, do you have to have a license to do this? Is this something you were saying there, there is laws about it? Is this something that you think should be regulated more, because I know that there are these people out there, I'm sure, who, will take someone's money and then just make things up. They don't actually have those skills. Is there a way that you could regulate that better, do you think?
Um, the way I see it is, I don't think most spiritualists find it an insult that they should legally disclaim their work because it's their religious belief. And unfortunately, there are people that can prey on the gullible. And that's when I do any reading, any show, any event, you have to say, if you're vulnerable, gullible, or of a nervous disposition, you should have a second opinion about whether this is for you. Well, trying to actually police that is almost like mission impossible. And although there's apart from the law that applies in the UK, and there's the National Federation of Spiritual Healers and there's spiritualist churches, I think trying to police what comes out of the mouths of psychics, mediums, and so on and so forth would be really difficult. And the one thing I do is I invite people to record everything I say, and I do actually record their readings as well. So that, because obviously a lot of, especially with the psychic side, a lot of the things that are said at the time will make no sense whatsoever because they haven't happened yet.
So it's there for them to look back on and say, okay, what was it Julie was saying 6 months ago? Let's have a listen to that again. Is there some indicators there of something that's going to happen?
Yeah. It's not easy, because some people think, well, if there was an afterlife, then surely my grandmother Marjorie Matthews would come through and say, Julie used to see me every single day after school. She used to walk and go and get my prescription. People have it in their head what they think would be said, and it doesn't always quite work like that. And sometimes if you feel like you're stating the obvious, but I don't edit them out like, oh, they love and miss you. Well, of course their loved ones are going to love and miss them, but I can't not say that because that's what I've been told to say. It's like a one-way mirror. They can see us even if we can't always see them.
Is it quite demanding on you then if you've got a reading with somebody, say someone was in front of you? Is it a case that multiple people might come through to you and then you've got to filter that down?
Yes, people often come because they want to hear from that extra special someone, and I even get what I call gate crashers come through. So sometimes we get people that they knew that person has got a friend who had a daughter, for example, that passed away, and so people do come through and they're straight. The way I describe it is a bit like going to a family gathering. The first person you see or come across isn't the person that you necessarily want to hear from the most. If you remain patient, the others do turn up, but they do come through in a very peculiar order. It's not like, oh, your dad's here and It can sometimes start off with a grandfather or someone else's side of the family. So yeah, to answer your question, it's very rarely would be just one person. And they can be quite bossy as well. If someone wants to hear from their daughter, but they've got their grandmother's sister going on in my ear, I have to get past the grandmother's sister before I can get to the daughter, because otherwise they won't shut up talking in my head. It sounds a bit odd.
Do you then speak back to them? Is that done mentally? Do you say the words aloud? How would that look?
What I do is I talk to them telepathically, because sometimes they show me something that I don't understand, and they keep representing the same picture in my mind's eye. And so when I say to people, when I'm going quiet, it's not because I've got anything to say, I'm just clarifying to them what you mean. For example, they could keep showing me something completely random, like a horse or these saddles or things. I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Turns out that this farmeress kept finding saddles piled up in her front room that she definitely didn't put there. So it's, you have to say what I see or hear.
And then is it you channel this information through to the person, and then they almost, a bit like a detective, have to say, yes, that'll be to do with that, because obviously you don't know someone's entire backstory, do you? You're just getting these messages, and is it almost then down to them to take those messages and interpret them themselves?
Well, one thing I pride myself on is I don't ask unless I absolutely have to. I don't ask the client or the person I'm reading for questions. I want the spirit world to do the work, not the person. So if you get someone that keeps asking, can you take this? Can you take that? Do you understand this? Do you understand that? I don't work like that. And so sometimes I give a running commentary of the questions I am asking if it's not glaringly obvious what they're making reference to. For example, sometimes they have shown, I've recently, I don't remember many readings, but I kept seeing this lighthouse. And then I thought, and what I do is I tell them to take me, so obviously there's lighthouses all over the country. So then I get them to pull me to where I am and to show me a signpost or something I might understand or recognise. And so I saw the Golden Hind. I thought, right, we're in Brixham in Devon. So that's how I work with them, to try to so that person knows that who I say is with them is, and I want them to give them something that ideally only they would know, the person on the receiving end would know, which is almost like not trying to prove there is life after death as such, but it's sort of is their way. When they say, there's been a child come into the family whose name is Lily, and that Lily arrived after this woman has died, then that's the kind of thing I'm looking to achieve.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of 2 of our series discussing the Agatha Christie novel Dumb Witness. Today we have heard from international psychic medium Julie Angel, and she has shed some light on what life may have been like for the Tripp sisters in the book. Next time, we hear how Julie Angel helped author and friend of the show Maggie Moxham solve a murder from 1886. We also hear from more characters from the story, and we get to find out how a dog was so instrumental in solving Emily's murder. On the show, we absolutely love hearing from you, so if you have any comments or any questions, please contact us at A Bit of a Christie, and we can be found on all major social media platforms. Thank you again for listening. I've been Hazel Jones, and this is A Bit of a Christie.